Hello, everybody, and good afternoon to the people in Europe, and good morning to the people in Canada, which I hope we will have more people from Canada today because we have a speaker from that far away. And I welcome you all to our webinar about the investments and efforts on quantum technology beyond Europe, which generally we treat various topics regarding Europe and ecosystem in Europe. And today is a specially dedicated webinar where we will learn about things that are happening outside. Let me tell you a little bit about the training session that is ahead of us, and in general, the training that we are running. Okay. I hope you see my slides. Could I ask somebody from the speakers to confirm that you see the slides from me?
Yes,
we've got them.
Great. So we are in the quantum technology training for policymakers, and I'd like to right away precise that we are targeting policymakers from different types, which is governmental on the European and also national levels, and also industrial dimension, as well as research and academia. And we are very proud to see that we actually have all this spectrum covered in among our registrants. Today, as I already said, we're going to hear about the quantum technology beyond Europe, and in particular about efforts and investments in this domain. Actually, I see that there is a little bit of misleading in my first slide already, but in any case, I'd like to let you know that the next session will be dedicated to the EU and bilateral public funding strategies for quantum technologies. So stay tuned for the next invite. Let me remind you about the team in the National Research Council that is taking care of preparing the seminar with the help of the coordination and support action of the Quantum Flagship QCAT CSA. So we have Costanza Toninelli, who is the researcher and the leader of the responsible leader of this action, the director of the Institute, Francesco Cataliotti, and our project manager, Chiara Mustarelli. Me, Oxana Mishina, as a research fellow, and Diana Tartaglia, PhD student in our team. Our main goal here today and the following sessions as well are to gain knowledge, that our registrants gain knowledge to take informed decisions, of course, cooperate with peers from other countries, as we have already started with our speakers today, and also sustain the conversation on quantum technology topics with experts that you are facing every day. About the participant of our training, we are really happy that indeed all the types of policymakers are covered, as I mentioned, governmental, research, industry, and academia. And also most of them are actually keeping them really well informed regarding the quantum technology development. And we are keen on providing the best fresh information up to date. The countries along Europe are all covered, not all in the same percentage, but we are working hard on involving more and more countries in participating in this training. So come back to the efforts beyond the Europe, and I'd like to invite our first speaker, and it will be Joe Spencer, who is currently in the United Kingdom. And he's the quantum technology specialist and the business leader with diverse career in the forefront of quantum innovation. He's currently in quantum business affairs, leading for the European Quantum Industry Consortium, QUIC, and the key account manager at the Global Quantum Intelligence, LLC, where he helps drive quantum advancement globally with a trusted and authoritative approach. He also serves as a director for IonQ Consulting and providing the technical consultancy for defense projects and for fostering early career talents through tailored industry placement. We are really happy to have Joe here with us today. And the stage is yours, Joe, please.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Oksana. You just multiple share. Here we go. Right. So first of all, I'm going to do a little bit of a shameless plug about our work at GQI and how we view the ecosystem, global ecosystems, especially, and the UK ecosystem as well. And we tend to break down quantum, both technology, market understanding, strategy, through what we call frameworks and approaches. So we literally take a quantum computer and break it down to a physics package, control plane, software layer. But we also apply this framework and this taxonomy to all the pillars of quantum technology, as well as things like for defining strategy as well. We put all of this together into playbooks and frameworks and models to allow various types of customers of ours and clients to understand the ecosystem. So we like to see ourselves sitting at the center of the quantum ecosystem, working alongside hardware vendors. We work alongside large scale, we call end users or suppliers in quantum. Critically as well, governments globally, the UK government, as well as Qatar, various other European governments and US departments, and also investors over the last 18 months supporting about $2.5 billion worth of due diligence. So we like to see ourselves kind of at the center of this ecosystem and really trying to help drive and foster it. So just as a way, I don't know if anybody can give a little reaction or a thumbs up if anybody has seen this graph before, this Amara's curve. I don't know if you have, a little like if you have, but it basically the indicator, and again, I'm not sure of the background of everybody here, so how quantum literate everyone is, but I'll give a little bit of an example that Amara's curve tends to basically say that humans in generally get it wrong on both fronts, that we tend to overestimate a technology in its nascent phase and underestimate the capability in the long-term phase as well. So it's always really important, especially with quantum, to consider this in the back of your mind at how quantum could have that kind of disruptive impact. We've seen it multiple times throughout as technology develops. You know, the overpromise of the internet in the 90s with the dot-com boom, but the unexpected capability that it has on our daily lives today. Similarly with space, early we were thinking of colonizing Mars within a generation, but we would never really have thought that GPS would be so critical in our everyday lives. And you know, AI as well, we see that now, and we want to go and make sure that quantum is probably going to follow the same curve. But can we change that line of best fit, that human expectations, to match what it could be for quantum and ensure that we get the most advantage out of it? So another thing that you probably are all aware of is that quantum technology is really considered a strategic resource globally. So there is a quantum arms race, you may call it, definition of strategies. I think there are now 33 national strategies and more being defined as more countries want to get their skin in the game with quantum technology. And generally speaking, these ecosystems and these strategies are built up within a similar kind of framework, with a vision to develop the technology in the supply chain, understanding of the economic advantage that it will provide long term, as well as aligning with government agenda for political stability, as well as kind of long-term environmental impact as well. But let's have a little look back in time as to where quantum started. So this was early quantum initiatives in the UK, Netherlands, back over 10 years ago now. In fact, the UK has just celebrated last year with the National Quantum Technology Showcase, the 10th anniversary of this event, which if you ever get an opportunity to go, I'd invite you all to attend. It's held in London in around November time every year. It's free to attend, or pretty much free, I think, and it brings together vendors, policymakers, people demonstrating technology. And over this last 10 years, we've seen, these technologies move from posters at an academic conference to lab bench demonstrations to fully fledged products and companies that are actually selling technology to the ecosystem now to end users. This has moved on now. We can see it's around 5.9 billion, significantly moved on over the last few years as well. So I'm just going to move over to, and there's another picture of the type of investments and government money put across this ecosystem globally. But what we've done at GQI, we've performed PESTEL analysis. So PESTEL is political, economical, sociological, technological, environmental, and legal. I got it all right, I think. And we've applied this by looking at the 33 national strategies that we have found, putting them through our frameworks, our analytical tools, looking at their strategies and ranking them effectively through a framework that we've developed. And it's quite pleasing, especially to UK people, but also organisations like the Department of Business and Trade and DCIT and the UK Office for Quantum, that through this framework, the UK ranks second globally, just slightly behind the US. This report, this PESTEL analysis report, is available on our GQI website. You feel free to have a look at it, where it details the breakdown in more detail, and you can also look at the other countries and their roadmaps and strategies that we've defined as well. So I guess the question really is, what is the UK doing well or doing at the moment? We're in a bit of a transition period because we've had a change of government last year. There is a hiatus on some aspects of quantum with a spending review, but the UK has committed to their 5 quantum missions, which is a long-term vision. And again, I can send these slides out afterwards if people want to have a bit more of a investigation in there. But we're, one mission on quantum computing, networking, sensors, especially sensors that are going to be deployed in hospitals, help optimize the NHS. We have another mission which is a strong focus on what we call PNT, position, navigation and timing, for autonomous navigation perhaps, or GPS resilience, as well as a networked quantum centers, what we call a quantum, we don't like the term quantum internet, but a quantum internet of things, or a quantum network. So these are the missions that have been outlined by the government, and effectively the technology that's going to be developed now is going hand in hand with those missions to be able to be sort of well aligned to them. So let's have a look at what the government have been doing. So recently there's been, I think it was March 2023, there's been a new announcement of a commitment of $2.5 billion through the National Quantum Strategy over 10 years, which is doubling the amount of public investment in it. The NQCC, the National Quantum Computing Centre, has been opened up now and has international partners working there with 7 different computing test beds spanning multiple quantum computing modalities across all these different platforms available. We can boast around 122 research collaborations in the UK, but also internationally as well, and a large packet of funding to train more students for future technologies as well, making sure that we can bring quantum to school. And I'll touch on that again in a bit, because that's an important point. In addition to those sort of pop figures and those numbers, we can see that there is a strategic positioning of the UK. So our strategy is aligned with those quantum missions that we have to advance technology as well as advance the adoption of technology in society. We have partnerships globally across multiple other nations: Switzerland, Japan, Germany, France. We have an MOU with the Netherlands as well, Canada and the US, and we'll probably imagine Louise might touch on that a little bit more during her presentation. And the other thing as well is the UK is positioning themselves strongly within what we call this AUKUS framework, which is the US-Australian collaboration. Potentially other partners will be joining that soon as well, but this allows you to overcome some limitations on things like export control as well, and has quantum in mind for defense and security applications. So we'll have a look at, so we've looked at the political situation, what that political ecosystem looks like. What's good in the UK? The UK is a small country, geographically speaking, but we have a thriving startup environment. We have 37 startups that are actively researching contributing to the UK, as well as on a global scale. Organizations like Cambridge Quantum that are now Quantinuum, Oxford Quantum Circuits, New Quantum, and many more as well. And this has really been fostered through the support of the government, the NQCC, the original quantum technology hubs, and funding boosts and government commitment to government funding is allowing these startups to continually accelerate, as well as delivering on projects that are aligned with the government strategy. So last year, the government released what they call the Quantum Catalyst Fund, which were funding pots of money effectively to do particular goal-driven research projects with startups, industry, as well as end users as well. So partnering up with things like National Rail or RSK, so they have the end use application in mind already. And finally, as well, last year, we've announced what we call the new technology hub. So this was something we've been waiting for a while, but announcement of transitioning from the old program where we had hubs in sort of York and Oxford, and the new hubs and what those new hubs missions look like now. And we can see that they're very different from the previous hubs, which were very research focused, whereas these hubs are now positioned in similar places across the UK, Heriot Watt, Glasgow, Oxford, Cambridge, but they now have names and suggestions that they are working on very particular sort of use cases, problems with very particular applications in mind. So it's moving from quantum from research point of view to quantum for application point of view. And these are things like developing of quantum networks for advancing the interconnected quantum technologies to make sure that distributed quantum computing become more useful, or even quantum networks, quantum biomedical sensing. So we have organizations like Circa Magnetics in Nottingham that develop their OPM helmets for which potentially could help save lives, but there are other imaging and sensing technologies for the biotech sector, and that can support the NHS as well. The Birmingham has their hub for sensing and timing, which is an evolution of the previous one, and this again can help deploy and accelerate precision timing as well as PNT solutions, and again hubs for interconnection and integration and deployment of quantum computing systems. One critical thing that each nation, each strategy has, and in some respects it used to be called a bottleneck with the talent pipeline, but it's building the quantum workforce. So we are following £60 million to develop new quantum skills over 2035, as well as developing still new research projects to churn out and develop new PhD students and skills within the quantum sector. I think there's a stat that I heard from Sir Peter Knight a few years ago, who said something like in the last year there were more PhDs hired or more PhDs hired for roles than the entire national program produced in the prior 5 years before that. So whatever the human equivalent of peak oil is, we're there with the talent and the capability as well. But it's not just PhDs, it's technical staff, apprenticeships, people that can be operating dilution refrigerators and all of that ancillary equipment that's going to be enabling quantum. So that's another critical part as well. We've had, I'll just go over to a few quick technological advancements. So I think I've sort of detailed this a little bit before, but in the computing domain, we have the NQCC with the £30 million for test beds across those multiple qubit modalities. And we've even had acceptance of delivery of quantum computing systems from organizations like Inflection and Orca that are deployed there. Partnering and work with the likes of BT or Toshiba for deployment of dark fiber for secure data transfer and a QKD network throughout the UK. And again, organizations like NPL leading the way in standards and regulation as well, and government departments working on regulation. I think this is a really important one, especially as standardization becomes more and more important. So UK Quantum and Quick all have standards as one of their working groups, and people and organizations such as NPL sit at the center of most of those, and we're now leading on the world stage with joint technical committees regarding quantum standards, which is very exciting. Finally, we'll have a look at, in that PESTEL framework, environmental and legal. So the energy and the environment aspect is obviously of critical importance, but there's an interesting sort of legal aspect as well. This comes under our Horizon Europe re-partnership, but through limitations. And last year, or slightly the year before last, the announcement of regulatory controls, which other countries are doing the same as well, and it's the right thing to do. But making sure that quantum components or components that can be built up into systems are regulated as well. And this is coming across lots of nations, lots of countries doing this, and it's important to understand because it really does highlight the strategic thinking of countries at how important quantum technology is and the importance of sovereign capability, but also not to stifle international collaboration. So I'll just finish up now with a few key research milestones to give a good shout out to some of our UK companies, Oxford Ionics with achieving a high 2-qubit gate fidelity, Phasecraft, QLM for selling systems. These were one of the early ones that actually produce commercial viability in quantum sensing, and again, Circumagnetics for the OPM work. So with that, I think that's probably to time or slightly quick, but I'll pass over to Louise, and then we could probably have some discussion afterwards. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Joe. This was a great presentation, and I'm already seeing questions coming up. So if you feel like you can answer them in writing, this is also an option, but we will come back to them anyway after the presentation of Louise. So now I'd like to welcome Louise Turner, who will be presenting us the Canadian ecosystem. And Louise is the CEO of the Quantum Algorithms Institute in British Columbia, Canada. And QAI supports the growth for jobs and companies in British Columbia's quantum computing sector. Louise is an expert in economic development, and she's focusing on creating the right conditions for the adoption of technology and innovation. Louise previously served as the president of the Perimeters Technology Council in British Columbia, providing insights into the needs of growing tech companies for the British Columbia government. She holds MBA for Crafted School and Management in the UK, and also is an excellent coach, board advisor, and an angel investor. Welcome, Louise, and we are looking forward to hear for your presentation.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Oxana, and thank you also for having me here. I will just get my slides up and running so that everyone can see them. So I hope that you can see that okay with the slides full screen.
Yes, well, thank you.
So as Oxana said, I'm the CEO of the Quantum Algorithms Institute. We were set up about 5 years ago by the government of British Columbia to support the growth of the quantum computing sector in British Columbia. So British Columbia government, and we are founding members. We're a collaboration between the 3 large research universities, University of Victoria, Simon Fraser University, and the University of British Columbia, who all have their own research focuses on quantum. Our founding members also included 3 local quantum companies, D-Wave, who created the world's first annealing quantum computer, and actually the world's first quantum computer that's commercially available, which they launched in 2011. 1Qubit, who set themselves up as the world's first quantum software company in 2012, and Photonic, who are working on a full stack quantum computer that they're building here. And then we also have relationships with Microsoft and IBM, who are also very active in our community. So I wanted just to talk a little bit about economic development, because I find that people get a little confused. It's quite straightforward, but it's really the driver for what we're doing, and we would probably fit into one of the hubs in Joe's diagram of the ecosystems, focusing really on the economic side and the adoption of technologies. So, you know, our government is interested in companies that generate great revenues, employees that are well paid, because those tax revenues enable us to drive the economic, the social sort of contract between governments and their people. And in order to support the ecosystem, in the words of IBM sales teams, nothing happens till somebody sells something. And at the moment, there's lots of talk about what quantum computing will do and quantum technologies will do, but there are actually very few customers, and the customers that are there are kind of keeping quiet about what they're doing. So we are focusing on trying to develop use cases and demonstrate the business reasons for people to want to use quantum. We're also looking at how do we grow the workforce, and I'll talk more about the workforce as we move on. We organize ourselves around 3 strategic pillars. Playing with the real world is the idea of industry projects, and we're looking at both constructive projects and also the making sure that BC and Canadian organizations can protect themselves against post-quantum threat. We, as I mentioned, are looking at growing the workforce. And then Ecosystem Hum is really about being able to tell the world that we've got a lot of great things going on in British Columbia, that we have been a leader in commercializing this space, and also in raising awareness, because in groups like this, where we have, you know, 70 or so people turning up for a seminar, it's easy to believe that everybody knows about quantum. But if you just go out on the street and ask anybody you find what they know about quantum, they will probably start talking about, you know, Quantinuum and Ant-Man and all kinds of, you know, and Star Trek. So we're trying to make sure that quantum is taken seriously as both a place for driving an economic agenda, but also for people to go and get jobs. So Canada does have a national quantum strategy. They announced $360 million in 2023 to build on more than $1 billion of R&D investment that had been made in the previous 15 years. You can find the strategy online, and I won't spend time going over that, but effectively it organizes around 3 technological areas and 3 social sort of ecosystem areas. So I also wanted to kind of give you a view today of what's going on in Canada. So in terms of research, I mentioned the 3 universities in British Columbia, but there's also a lot going on in Alberta, where there are also another 3 universities, and the economic hub for quantum in Alberta is called Quantum City. Ontario has probably a very long history of quantum, supported by private investments that have been made in the Perimeter Institute, which is a private research organization, and has a number of universities, and Quantum Valley Ideas Lab is a business accelerator in the quantum sensing space in particular. And then in Quebec, there is also a very active ecosystem with their polytechnics and technical colleges also being very active participants, and District is the driver of their main economic sort of engagement. So then commercially, there is some debate as to how many companies there are in Canada dealing with quantum. It kind of depends how you measure things. We do an annual survey, which I'll talk a little bit more about, that demonstrated 47 companies that we could specifically say were definitely working on quantum. And we think that there are more than 70 companies now. Some of that is because, as NIST has announced its standards on post-quantum algorithms, that a lot of the communications and networking folks have started to wake up and say, oh, quantum, yes, we should do something. So the couple of things I wanted to highlight here is that Canada does have 4 companies developing full stack quantum computers, D-Wave, Photonic, Anion, and Xanadu. Anion have a 48 qubit computer deployed in Quebec for Canadian researchers to use. And then Quebec also has Pascal and Candela having presence in their area there. Pascal in particular, their North American CEO is based in Quebec. We have a variety of software companies. Interestingly, Multiverse went through a Canadian business accelerator, and they're Canadian and Spanish organization. And as you'll see from some of the headings, we are computing, the software and hardware side of things, post-quantum cryptography, which is a growing space, and then the sensors and cryogenics side of things. We have presence in all of those, and a very active ecosystem. So people are working across the country and between these various sectors to drive economic growth in this area. This is not an exhaustive list of icons there, but just to give you a bit of an idea of what's going on, we have a national trade association that represents the quantum industry, and their website is well worth a look if you want to see what's going on in the economic side of things. And we also have the Creative Destruction Lab, who are a broad accelerator, but who have a quantum stream. And then in Quebec, serving the whole country, there is Quantum Venture Studio, who are an incubator with a really neat model that I don't have time to go into at the moment, but they're worth looking at, and Quantasset, who are specifically a quantum fund set up by a couple of PhD quantum folks to support Canadian startups. I wanted to give you a little bit of commentary on some market dynamics elements, and I will walk through this just quite quickly so that we can cover off a number of areas, and then I'm very happy to chat more about any of these topics in questions. So, in terms of when quantum computing is going to be here, if you talk to a lot of academics, they will tell you it's a 20-year science project. But the reality of all of that money that Joe was talking about from national initiatives and from also private investors means that this really is the sort of definition of a deep technology where science is being developed at the same time that a commercial solution is being built by companies. And so these 6 companies and more are saying 5 years or fewer, and we will have a commercially viable quantum computer. And so that's the sort of what's driving our agenda. One of the analyses that I like to follow is the McKinsey Digital Quantum Monitor stats. They published their latest numbers in April last year. And there are 2 things that I want to highlight from them: the number of quantum companies that they say that are in the world, and the number of quantum markets. Just focusing on the companies, this is a lot of companies, 261 companies developing quantum computers. And I think that what's going to happen in all of these markets, but in computing in particular, is there's going to be a big shakeout, and there will be nowhere near 261 quantum computing companies in 5 years' time. It'll be very interesting to watch how the market develops. And one of the things that's going to influence that in particular is the quantum benchmarking initiative. And I don't know if many of the folks in the EU are keeping tabs on this if you're outside the quantum space, but DARPA have announced a project really to try and test out the idea that quantum is going to be available in 5 years, or is it going to be 50 years away? And so the US government is going through a quite rigorous program, which a lot of companies from around the world will be participating in. They should be announcing the largest number of companies participating that have been accepted into their program shortly. I think they were meant to announce them in January, but we're waiting to see who's in there. And I think that their choices will have an influence on how that market shakeout works. So the McKinsey work is a sort of top-down analysis that assumes, I don't quite know what they assume, but anyway, they give you a top-down view of where they think that the market is going, and very well founded and established. One of the challenges that we found trying to work out what it is that we do to support the growth of our local and national ecosystem is that a lot of the basic data that one might hope to have about an economy and about a sector is just not available in terms of quantum. So in North America alone, there's an international coding system for jobs, for company types, and for university training courses. And none of those systems have quantum as a word in them. So you can't actually work out how many people are employed in the sector anywhere in North America. I'm guessing that it is similar in the UK, in the EU system. But we have tried to work out from ground up analysis and looking at information that we can find publicly available and on the internet, and doing an analysis of various things like the archive database of papers to try and look at how the market is developing. So we have 2 reports which are online, which you can go and take a look at. We're working on the 2025 report, which should be out in June sometime. And one of the things that we have looked at here is how big is the quantum workforce. Our focus clearly is on Canada, and we think that we have a couple of different ways of analysing things, but we think that there are probably 4,000 people in Canada if you count about 2,000 people in quantum companies and 2,000 people in academia, which makes Canada a country that has one quantum expert for every 10,000 people, which is really not very many. But it is actually, we think, the third most dense quantum expertise after Singapore and the UK. And we do different analysis in using social media declarations, which clearly has a bias because it doesn't include anybody from China. It has very minimal representation from South Korea and Japan, where we know a lot's going on in the quantum arena. But taking it for what it is, probably is representing the developed world, for want of a better term. We think that there are 4,000 people, so another 2,000 more than our original estimate, 4,000 people working in quantum companies in Canada, and that we are 5% of the quantum workforce that is self-identified on social media, which makes the quantum workforce on social media 80,000 people. So, is that a realistic number? If we're 100% out and there are 160,000 people, that's still a very tiny workforce, which gives us cause for concern. And I want to go back to the digital monitor from McKinsey and look at the quantum markets. They are suggesting that the computing market alone in 2040 will be as big as $131 billion. I think absolutely the computing market is going to be exploding, but one of the concerns that we have is, do we have enough of the right talent to grow globally, to grow the ecosystem? And if we look at the semiconductor industry, which has enjoyed more than 80 years of high value growth, they're expecting to be a $1 trillion industry by 2030. They employed 2.3 million people in 2024 to support that $1 trillion of activity, and they're growing by 100,000 people per year. So if we're right about 80,000 people being in the quantum sector in the world, then the quantum sector is smaller than the annual growth of the semiconductor industry. So something to really mull over. I would love to have a dialogue with anybody who has any views on what the workforce numbers are elsewhere in the world, to try and road test this. But at the moment, there are no, that I'm aware of, formal government numbers that we can begin to use to work out really what the strategy is and how we move forward with this. One of the other things that's influencing the market is the announcement of the post-quantum cryptography standards by NIST. I think it is not unreasonable to expect that the post-quantum threat is 5 to 10 years away. Certainly the Canadian government is looking to make itself post-quantum secure using the new standards by 2030, the federal government this is. And we have national guidelines on becoming post-quantum ready. We're working with companies in British Columbia and across Canada to have some strategies to make sure that organizations, institutions, and government institutions are post-quantum ready. And that also is influencing, who counts in the quantum market. And then the final thing that I just wanted to touch on is that one of the things that we launched in June last year is the Centre of Responsible Quantum Innovation and Technology, and kind of getting the social aspects of quantum adoption and equity and fairness and diversity is an important element of the perspective that we're taking in Canada. So there is an initiative that we are partnering with the Perimeter Institute, with a number of other organizations. We have more information about this on our QAI website. If you're interested in that, I can also answer questions about that. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to any questions.
Many thanks, Louise, for this insightful presentation and the perspective on the development in Canada and worldwide. This was very much precious for me. I invite back Joe to join us for the panel. And now we will be answering the questions from the audience. It was really nice to see both of your presentations next to each other. I have to say that I have really things boiling in my head, so I think the discussion is going to be really interesting. So I will start from one of the questions that came to us already through, yes, applause coming through the registration form already. And we have a question from Belgium, from Jan Song, and who is active in policymaking within academic research, think tanks and industry, seems to be a person who thinks about different dimensions. And his question is tricky. First, I thought, how could we actually answer it now? But I think we have great ideas. So he's asking, how can we transfer learnings from outside Europe into the EU community ecosystem? So you could take this question as a question from a Belgium side and challenges, or from the EU level at large. So what are your experience on being able to share learnings and learnings?
Yeah. So maybe I can just have a talk about a couple of things that we have done in British Columbia. We started trying to assess the number of sort of, what skills are needed, what training programs should we be developing to help upskill people already in the workforce so that they can move into quantum roles. And we found that there was virtually no information. The one thing that we did find was an EU study on skills required that is being used to inform what universities should be teaching in master's degrees in quantum. And so we reached out to Franziska Greinert, who was one of the authors of this study, and we now have a kind of dialogue going back and forth, and we would be publishing our own analysis of what the skills gap looks like. We are developing a number of personas that people could be thinking of in terms of, who my audience is for training. So that's a very specific project, and I think that some of the answer comes from this, that it's worth looking at what information is out there and reaching out and establishing individual relationships to begin to inform what's going on, as well as doing the kind of exercise that you're doing today, so that we can raise awareness of what resources are available where. So thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this experience, Louise. Do you have something, Joe, that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, I think the thing I would probably add is, if the question was effectively what can the EU learn, I would say, first of all, it is learning quite quickly. I think seeing this ecosystem and the flagship evolve over the last few years, I would say now individual national strategies within countries within the EU are more coherently aligned with the flagship's kind of vision. So that's good, because that's kind of coherent integration effect. Acknowledge the fact that individual nations within the European Union are not going to be able to compete against the capitalistic megalith of the US. And to Louise's point as well, identify your resources and the strengths, free movement or relative free movement of people. So assess your supply chain, both the strengths and weaknesses of the supply chain from a component-led point of view, elemental-led point of view, and human resources point of view, and ensure that they can be transferred around. So we can see these things through like the chip, or the new Joint Chips Act, or Chips Undertaking, or whatever it's called, and recommendations for talent visas, etc., that have come out of the SRIA, the Strategic Research Industry Agenda.
Thank you, Joe. I'd like to highlight, okay, now we're starting to get questions from the question and answer line. I was wondering if it's working well, so because usually we are getting it full right away. Then I will go directly there. So we have a question from Antonis Argyros, and he's asking, he's saying that we are building out the quantum ecosystem in Greece. So Greek quantum, oh, where did it go? Wait a second. Something is happening behind my scenes. Because David already got this question. Okay. I don't know if we still need to read it. I just read it to finish. So the quantum ecosystem in Greece, the Greek quantum gate. I would love to connect what's the best way to engage with you. with the organization, and do you have a structured process for that? So I imagine that this question is addressed to both Joe and Louise, and if Louise could also share the way she could be contacted, or if you'd like to already highlight some ways that you use, please come over, Louise.
Yeah, sure. So the simplest way to contact me is that I'm on LinkedIn. So connect to me on LinkedIn and put a little note saying that you were at this session, and I will connect to you, and then we can move on from there. And I will be very happy. We're a very small organization, so I have fewer than 20 people working with me, but we have big ambitions and we're doing a lot of different things. So I would be very pleased to connect with anybody from this session.
Thank you very much for your availability, Louise. And yeah, I think now we have settled out how to run through the question and answer session. Although, Michele, I was actually receiving your questions in the chat as well, and I was going to read them now, but thank you very much for providing them through the Q&A. And there is one question to Joe from Michele Capobianco from Italy. And the question is, how do you assess the roadmap difference, relationships, influence between those 33 startups that you mentioned and the tech giants?
If I understand the question, it's not necessarily there's startups as are we on about the roadmap differences between the national strategies that we assess through the PESTEL framework, or roadmaps between startups and large-scale technology companies? What is the question?
Well, as I read it, is that there is an interest in particular comparing the startups and the tech giants.
Right. Oh yes, yeah, I see it now. Well, the way that we've built our framework, and I'm more than happy to talk Michelle through our frameworks in detail. I haven't got them to hand now, but we break down. We effectively use subtly different frameworks for large-scale organizations and startups, and that's assessing things like company roadmaps and how they fit into the market. But really, we build a framework around the technology. So whether you're IBM or Microsoft or New Quantum or Photonic, the physics and the technology is sort of fundamentally the same between how they are. So they're robust enough to be able to put different company roadmaps and different qubit gate fidelities, performances, even for sensing technology through these frameworks, and come out the other side and be assessed against.
Thanks so much, Joe. I will then jump onto the question to Louise, and same person, Michele Capobianco, is asking how to, or try to, differentiate between the hype-driven quantum projects, companies, and genuinely promising and sustainable companies. There are a lot of definitions here. Promising and sustainable companies, I like that they are put together, I mean, in general, so it's great.
Yeah, so it's a big challenge because it's difficult to know. We don't have the resources as a small organization to go and talk in detail with all of the companies to really look under the hood. So we tend to we have to rely on the information that they put out online, and also a data analyst economics view of what a company can do, and the technical details of whether what they're representing is actually what they will be able to deliver, are two rather different things. So it is a real challenge. We try to be, the reason that we only have 47 companies in our analysis from 2024 is that we are really being quite rigorous in saying, yeah, if it's not clear that you're definitely a quantum company, then we're going to leave you off the list, so that we're counting really who's in, we're sort of taking a conservative view. But it is a real challenge, and we have to go on the basis of how people are representing themselves and the information they put out.
Oxana, do you mind if I also add probably a good point to actually invite David, one of my kind of co-panelists, to this, because part of our role is cutting through the hype and providing that unbiased opinion, and we do that a lot through due diligence and technical reports. And David has been
welcome, David, and we would be happy to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very important challenge. And one of the key ways we approach it is we start off with a series of frameworks. And that means structures, ways that we assess companies, ways that we assess use cases, ways that we assess ecosystems in a standardized way. And when we look at a particular quantum company, whether that's a hardware company or a software company, we look at where it's playing in the value chain. And then we look at how what it's proposing stacks up against the criteria we normally look to evaluate that segment of the value chain. And so a company, they may like what we're saying, they may not like what we're saying, but we're able to justify that by saying, well, look, these are the standard ways we do it. And that promotes comparability with other peers that are playing not anywhere in quantum, but specifically in that part of the quantum chain. And that's always for us, Touchwood to date has been a successful way to at least keep people on board with the objectivity of what we're saying. And it is often a balance. It's a balance between, what's proven versus what's a reasonable, optimistic challenge to take on versus what seems to have no basis.
Thank you very much, David. I think this brings us back to the very first question, which was asked, how can learnings can be incorporated from one country to another. And I think this is one more ground where frameworks of such kind could be shared and revised jointly and borrow the experience, which I think can only boost, let's say, the impact and the growth. So thanks a lot. We will jump into the next question from the Christopher Wolf. And I'd like to address it to all of you and in the chat because I think it's really profound. So, given the high numbers of companies worldwide working on quantum computing, would it make sense to concentrate more on other areas like quantum sensing to get an economically viable product, ethers?
So,
well, you go, Louise, and then I'll follow up.
Sure. So, for my money, I think that the market speaks well of what the opportunities are. So there is a line of thought that's put forward by companies that aren't producing quantum computers that sensing is the place to go because it's simpler. I think technologically and physically it may not be simpler. And I think that the real interest that everybody has is in quantum computing. And so, there are the number of companies this is how markets develop. And the best way forward is to allow competitive groups to try chance their arm in the quantum computing or whichever technology they go after. And naturally that will, companies that aren't successful will fold.
So you're saying that this is the backward around, no? So it's like who is angry for what, and then actually the market starts to grow in that dimension. So in Canada, did you also start with this, let's say, even distribution of resources from the public domain, as there was in the quantum flagship, between all areas of the technological growth, like computing, simulation, communication, and sensing, or did you have already prior?
No, so the Canadian strategy, so the research world is rather different. So Canadian money is distributed based on peer-reviewed research, and so there's a competitive process there as to what gets funded. Similarly, the Canadian government doesn't have any real influence over what's going on in the market, and so the companies have grown up in the places that they are. It's definitely been influenced by where the research bases are, and actually, unusually for Canada, in Canada, we call it the peanut butter strategy, where you take resources and you spread them thinly so everybody gets a little bit. In quantum, they've decided not to do that and are focusing on 4 physical hubs. So British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec, but we're a country with 10 provinces and territories. So the folks in Saskatchewan who are doing great research and who are on my research slide miss out on a bunch of things because they're not recognized as one of those hubs. So it's the Canadian government trying this sort of differential strategy of focusing to be more successful. But the Canadian government also doesn't invest in companies. And so the companies that exist are part of a competitive international market, attracting funding and talent.
I see. Thanks so much, Louise. And Joe, what would be your position here?
I mean, it's always great to hear questions about sensing. So I come back from a sensing background in the defense domain, and I've spent the last 5 to 10 years to try and big up quantum sensing and say that you can actually utilize sensing today. But the promise of jam tomorrow with quantum is also very exciting. So it's probably no lie that quantum computing has a globally higher market value in the long term. And our quantum market models that we work on at GQI, and support this. But to say that, should we focus it, or is it not? If you remember the slides from earlier that I presented, if you look at the quantum missions in the UK, one of them is related to computing, two or three related to sensing in terms of applications of sensing in the NHS, application of sensing and timekeeping for PNT and resilient GNSS. And even our new hubs as well, 4 out of 5 of them are not directly related to computing. So, and I think this is also another kind of important aspect, because everyone's in the quantum sector takes, relatively speaking, a small slice of a small pie compared to other industries that are getting significant funding like AI at the moment. So to sort of quibble over the orders of magnitude of money we're talking about, we have to kind of zoom out for one and realize how small it is in comparison to a global ecosystem, and actually how much impact it can have. But also remember that investment in quantum as a whole, the physics is the same pretty much across all of these sectors. And if you have a strategy that is employing and developing integration of PQC or QKD solutions in a quantum safe quantum networks to defend yourself against, in the cybersecurity domain, and develop quantum sensors, the type of technologies you're going to develop over time are probably going to be enabling for quantum computing anyway. So, quantum sensors require advanced detectors, use of cryogenics. All of these supply chain and these components are going to be needing to be developed. So anything that you put in the sensing, don't think that it's diverting money away or from computing domain, say. It's probably going to long-term enable compute by enhancing the knowledge and capability in the area through some disruptive impact.
Yeah. I like your perspective. So that's to say, we are not getting behind on any tech. while working through one of it, we are actually there. But then it's really up to what is needed at the moment at the market. That would be like most in
we have to keep investors interested for the next 15 years, 10 to 15 years at least. And I think there has to be some low-hanging fruit, and we can see that in sensing.
Well, I think we are about to come to the end, and I'll let through one more question, because we have one in the question and answer session. It would be pity not to go through it. And the question is from Gerald Salazar, and he's asking, do you think that geopolitical tensions will affect or potentially even break the cooperation between countries? If that's so, is it possible to have a scenario where countries impose a restriction on IP or any part of the quantum supply chain? Let's start with Louise. We seem to have, or David, you wanted to go for it?
I could just offer my take on that. I think we absolutely will see the geopolitical fault lines being a dominant factor in the quantum sector going forward. Which countries are able to collaborate with which other countries, I think, will be a key issue in determining which group can achieve success. And that is going to affect how IP is shared. That is going to affect how companies have to strategically organize their activities.
Yeah, so the answer to both questions is simply yes. Yeah.
And I would just say that it is already the case. So The US has very strict export controls, and they've recently put quantum onto their list. And so quantum export controls are the same as for, attack helicopters and nuclear weapons. And they're things that people have to live with, and it causes us sort of concerns on a regular basis, trying to get researchers to be able to access the IBM Quantum Hub, which is based in Quebec. We have to make sure that we're complying with US export restrictions, which have very strict rules around who can access the technology and how they can access it. So we are already seeing it. And I think that the controls are potentially going to become much tighter. And yeah, it's very definitely a reality.
There's clear strategic partnerships already being formed. I mentioned earlier about things like the AUKUS framework, which is, to sum it up, it's a kind of a cheaty way of getting over ITAR controls in some respects. But we're also got to consider not only the hardware aspect, but the quantum software and quantum cloud-based services as well, where servers are going to be located in the future, and countries that are going to be calling them and asking them for algorithmic questions and how to access them as well.
Yeah, we are expecting for a very much changing landscape, it seems. Nonetheless, it's already challenging. And here I'd like to point that this Pascal analysis that Joe advertised today had a very, from my point of view, innovative approach on the governmental level that has included, next to the technical achievements, also the legal and societal aspects. And I have a feeling this is also one of the reasons why it scores high. I'm looking forward personally that such frameworks would be used more and more worldwide, and that would probably make it smoother, the way for all of us to come to the exploration of the potential of the quantum technologies that we all expect and looking for society. So thank you so much. It was a great session today, and I'm going to close the recording now, but please don't run away.
If you